Monitoring and controlling. Let me start with a myth. We can plan upfront 100% and then stick to that plan. This is not how projects are done. So planning is just to give you an indication of a timeline. It's a forecast. So it's based on what we know at the moment. And then we try to keep up to that plan, but it's never 100%. We compare our work with the plans and then plan the remaining work. So it's continuous planning. Some upper management may ask you during the project, are we on track with the original plan that was created right at the beginning of the project? Well, there were lots of or some unknowns. So it's best to smile and just give them a hug, show you care. I've mentioned monitoring and controlling. What's the difference between monitor and controlling? So monitoring is checking where we are compared to the plan, okay? And then controlling is making small adjustments or making adjustments to that plan. So that's why we put monitoring and controlling together. Now, what do we wish to measure in a project? What does PRINCE2 say we wish to measure in a project? Well, probably the most common things that people would think of, well, time and cost. And are we on time and within cost? But PRINCE2 proposes 5 other things to measure. It calls them variables or project variables. And all of these could cause the project to stop. Okay, so let me bring you through these. The first one is benefits. So this is the expected benefits, long-term benefits for the organization. So we have to keep an eye on this. The quality of the work we're doing, or the quality of the products being delivered. If we're producing very poor quality, then we're not doing very well, you know. Risk. So how much risk is there in the project? And if there's a lot of risk, maybe it's better to stop the project because there are other projects waiting which are much less riskier and can still give us similar benefits for the organization. Scope. You may have heard the word scope creep, where lots of new requirements are just creeping into the project and now the project has completely blown up. So we have got to keep an eye on this. And they've also added sustainability as a variable to keep an eye on as well. What that means is each organization may have sustainability targets. So we keep an eye on those as well. So in total, there are 7 variables the project manager should keep an eye on. These are also called project variables or performance targets as well. Actually, there are lots of names given, PRINCE2 gives for these. Now, there's a nice tip, actually, I like to say. So just imagine you have a cockpit in a car, you're driving a car, and in your car, you normally have 2 dials. You have one for speed and one for revs per minute. Well, in a project management car, you'd have 7 dials. So one for benefits, cost, quality, risk, scope, sustainability, and time. And then when someone asks you, hey, how is the project going? You just look at those dials and you go, that's how the project is going. You can even take a picture and send it to them. So that's how we can use these variables to just help us to keep an eye on where we are or how well we are doing with the project. Now, how to work with these variables? Well, as part of planning, the project will forecast each variable. So it'll have a forecast for time, cost, and benefits and so on. And then during the project, we compare the current status with the forecast, which makes sense. So for example, we forecast the cost of the project and then check the status. We forecast the risk of the project. We think there was not very risky at the moment, and then we continually check the status of risk. So the project manager is checking the current status of the 7 variables through the project. And it's a good time to do this. It's actually during the stages and at the end of the stages as well, because it's part of monitoring and controlling. Now, this may seem like a lot of administration, and it can be, but we can also make this easier on ourselves as well. PRINCE2 then may come across as very severe in its approach to monitoring and control, but if you think about it, most of these variables are quite important to keep an eye on anyway. Now, when to monitor and control? Well, the project is planned in the initiation stage. We really create that high-level project plan, which is a forecast on how actually the project should actually work. And here we set our first targets for those variables, and we agree them. So we say, okay, this is our forecast for expected benefits. These are our forecast for costs and time and so on. So these will be included into the project plan. And then the project manager will then monitor these variables during each stage of the project. And if we come across a big issue, of course, then we look at the impact of that big issue on our variables of the project. Okay, now, what do you think happens at the end of each stage? Well, the project manager, of course, wants to report on the performance of the last stage. So what they will do is they will take a snapshot of the current variables and they will use this in the report, and they'll say, okay, for time we're doing this, for cost we're doing this, and for benefits we expect this, and so on. So it's really good for reporting as well. So they could even take a picture of that cockpit in the car and just add that to the report, and that gives a lot of information on how the project is actually working. Now, what documents do you think the project manager would use to monitor and control the project? Whenever I use the word documents, PRINCE2 uses the word management products because they are products used to manage the project, or documents used to manage the project. It's just part of the terminology, and I say this a lot in the rest of the course, so it's a good idea to introduce that term now. So, ask the question again. Which products, management products, are used for monitoring and controlling? Actually, almost everything. Okay, so I won't list them. It's just that every product has a reason to be there, and it captures information. And we know that now that the 7 variables which we were discussing are really part of the plans. And the approach in how we follow up on, let's say, risk and quality is defined as well very early in the initiation stage as well. Okay, and then the reports which are regularly sent to the project board, giving a highlight overview on how the stage is doing, can include the status of these variables as well. So that's it for the moment for monitor and controlling.